When we talk about the world of video games, especially those developed by smaller studios or publishers like GameMill Entertainment and Fair Play Labs, there's an unsettling pattern that's becoming all too familiar: the release of broken, buggy games that somehow still manage to slip through the cracks, unscathed by the scrutiny they deserve. Let's dive into why this keeps happening and examine the ignorance of fans and the role of content creators who, whether intentionally or not, contribute to the problem. The allure of nostalgia and low expectations. First, it's important to acknowledge the nature of the games being released by GameMill and Fair Play Labs. Many of these titles, including Nickelodeon All-Star Brawl 2, NASB 2, rely heavily on nostalgia. By tapping into beloved franchises like SpongeBob SquarePants, TMNT, or Avatar: The Last Airbender, these games draw in fans who are already emotionally invested before they've even seen a gameplay trailer. The nostalgic connection lowers players' critical defenses and creates an environment where, as long as they see their favorite characters, many are willing to overlook glaring flaws. Compounding this issue is the low expectation many players have when it comes to games from smaller studios or publishers. When a game comes from a company like GameMill, known for its budget titles, fans often expect a certain level of junkiness or lack of polish. This mindset can be both a blessing and a curse. While it might allow fans to enjoy the game despite its imperfections, it also lets developers off the hook for releasing subpar products. Players end up excusing what should be inexcusable simply because they never expected much in the first place. The content creator pipeline, free codes, early access, and clickbait culture. Content creators play a huge role in this cycle. Let's be real, many content creators thrive on the early access culture. Getting a game code before everyone else, having the opportunity to produce content on a title while it's still fresh and new, and potentially capitalizing on the initial surge of interest are all major incentives. But this early access comes at a cost. It often leads to a superficial analysis of the game. When creators are given early access, there's an unspoken pressure to speak positively about the game, or at least to focus on the positive aspects, to maintain good relationships with the developers and publishers who provide these codes. Even if a game is riddled with bugs, performance issues, or outright broken mechanics, there's a tendency to gloss over these problems or present them in a humorous light rather than a critical one. After all, negative coverage might jeopardize future opportunities for early access or partnerships. Moreover, many content creators are chasing clicks and views. The reality is, the moment a game stops being a hot topic, creators move on. This creates a situation where the game is promoted heavily at launch, but when the inevitable bugs and issues start to pile up, the attention has already shifted elsewhere. The audience is left with a game that doesn't live up to its initial hype, but the creators have already moved on to the next big thing, leaving their followers with little recourse. The ignorance and complicity of fans. Let's not absolve the fanbase from this conversation. Fans who ignore or defend the flaws in these games are a crucial part of why studios like GameMill and Fair Play Labs continue to release buggy titles with minimal repercussions. The cycle of ignorance often starts with a lack of critical engagement. Fans are so eager to relive their childhood memories or experience new content that they either don't notice the flaws or choose to ignore them. This is especially prevalent in communities centered around nostalgia-driven games, where the emotional connection to the IP outweighs the demand for quality. Additionally, fans who are vocal about their enjoyment of the game, despite its issues, inadvertently contribute to the normalization of substandard releases. When forums, social media, and comment sections are flooded with positivity, developers see this as validation that their approach is working. Why invest more time and resources into polishing a game if the audience is willing to accept it as is? The monetization trap, DLCs and microtransactions. Another factor that perpetuates this cycle is the monetization model that these games often employ. While the base game may be flawed, there's always the promise of future DLCs or patches that will fix the issues or add new, exciting content. This creates a situation where fans are encouraged to keep investing in a game, hoping that it will eventually live up to its potential. But often, these patches are too little, too late, or the new content is locked behind paywalls, leading to further frustration. This approach to monetization preys on the sunk cost fallacy, where players continue to support a game financially because they've already invested so much time and money into it. The hope that the game will eventually improve keeps players on the hook, even when it becomes clear that the game may never reach the quality it should have had at launch. The developer's perspective: under pressure, overpromised, and underdelivered. From the developer's side, there's undoubtedly pressure to deliver these games on tight deadlines, often with limited resources. This doesn't excuse the release of broken games, but it does help explain why it happens. Smaller studios like Fair Play Labs may not have the same level of resources or time as AAA studios, which can lead to rushed releases, especially when there's pressure from publishers like GameMill to capitalize on a particular market window, such as the release of a new movie, series, or trend related to the IP. However, what's frustrating is the seeming lack of transparency and accountability. When games are released in such a poor state, the least that can be expected is honest communication about what went wrong and how it will be addressed. Unfortunately, this is often not the case. Instead, we get vague promises of future patches, DLCs that are prioritized over fixing core issues, and a marketing cycle that moves on to the next project before the current one is truly finished. Why does this keep happening? The reason GameMill and Fair Play Labs keep getting away with releasing broken, buggy games boils down to a combination of low expectations, powerful nostalgia, the influence of content creators, and the willingness of fans to accept subpar products. It's a vicious cycle where each component feeds into the others. Developers are not held accountable because the fanbase is too forgiving, content creators move on too quickly, and the allure of beloved franchises blinds players to the flaws in the games themselves. If this cycle is ever going to be broken, it requires a shift in how all parties, fans, creators, and developers, approach these games. Fans need to be more critical and demand better quality from the outset, rather than hoping that things will improve later. Content creators need to be more honest in their assessments, even if it means risking partnerships or early access privileges. And developers need to prioritize delivering a polished product at launch, rather than relying on post-release patches to fix what should have been addressed during development. It's time for some real talk. The gaming community needs to stop letting nostalgia and low expectations be an excuse for poor quality. We need to hold developers and publishers accountable for the products they release, rather than allowing broken, buggy games to become the norm. Content creators, too, have a responsibility to their audience to be truthful and critical, rather than simply following the hype cycle. The next time a game like NASB 2 is released in a broken state, we shouldn't just shrug it off or wait for it to get better. We should demand better from the start. Because if we don't, nothing will change, and we'll keep getting the same flawed games from the same studios, year after year. It's time to break the cycle.